Good morning, everybody, on this wintry January 31st morning. We appreciate you all coming out for this special work session. Councilmember Bunker will be joining us in just a moment. So, last week I did my agenda on Wednesday because I was going out of town on Thursday, and this agenda item has been changed since then. So I am less than happy this morning. All of my notes and highlights have been erased. That being said, I had talked to the city manager about this issue when he first came on, and my concern with what is going on US 19 is we are not seeing what we had originally hoped for with the US 19 plan, which is a plan that I think staff put a lot of effort into and I think has good concepts. But I also think at a point you have to re-examine whether something is working. And currently, I don't think we're seeing the development patterns that we had hoped for. We're seeing a lot of storage units, we're seeing a lot of standalone apartment complexes, and that was not what was originally hoped for. We were going to hope for more mixed use, more work, live, play, all in the same location. And I think that's incredibly important. Late last year, we lost Heritage Insurance, which used to be on McCormick Boulevard. They were looking for a 100,000 square foot building for their corporate headquarters. Sadly, in the city of Clearwater, we did not have 100,000 square feet, and they have since moved to West Shore. So we lost all of those jobs within the city of Clearwater. That is one of my great concerns and one of the reasons that Mr. Jennings and I talked about this. He does not like the concept of a moratorium, nor does our staff, which is fine. It certainly has gotten the development community's attention, because I've gotten a number of very angry calls from people about a moratorium. But I think you have to re-examine whether something is having the desired effect. And I question whether we need even more incentives and also need to get the word out of what the development possibilities are on the US 19 corridor. That is not to say stopping forever, but I at least thought that we needed to have this discussion, and I appreciate all the work that staff has put into it. I read the entire report and had numerous notes, which are now somewhere in cyberspace. But we'll get through the program and hopefully have some great questions and come to some resolutions. This is a work session, so it is just amongst the council members today. And if citizens want to come and comment on this, they are certainly welcome on Thursday during Citizens to be Heard. With that, I will turn it over to Ms. Clayton.
Good morning, Gina, Clayton, Planning and Development Director. I'm glad to see we're matching this morning, Mayor.
Thanks for the phone call.
No problem. As you said, we're here today because the city administration was tasked with evaluating a possible moratorium on US 19. And to accomplish that, Planning and Development, with some assistance from Economic Development and Housing, prepared a report that outlines the history of our planning and policy work for US 19, the new construction that we see going on there, what we're seeing in the market, and then we also revisited the strategies of the US 19 plan to determine really if there's some recommendations that we could come up with for you to consider instead of imposing a moratorium. So as the Mayor said, our goal this morning is to generate some discussion, answer some questions. And I would point out that the changes that were made in the report, I think, were very minor. We found some math errors, so hopefully that doesn't really derail your questions and concerns, Mayor. Good morning. So because many or some of you may not have been here when the US 19 work began, the report provides a pretty detailed history of our planning efforts, which start back with the 2006 evaluation and appraisal report. That report initially identified areas on US 19 as activity centers appropriate for redevelopment and intensification. And that led to the adoption of what we call our citywide design structure map and policies that we included in the 2008 comprehensive plan update, and that designated Countryside Mall and Clearwater Mall as activity centers and US 19 as a redevelopment corridor. In 2011, Greenprint and the Economic Development Strategic Plan further strengthened our commitment to transitioning US 19 to a more mixed-use transit-supportive environment and one that supports the creation of high-wage employment opportunities. In 2012, we kept moving forward, and City Council approved the US 19 redevelopment plan, which organized the corridor into 3 different revitalization areas. It also established FAR allowances, provided design guidelines, and provided some redevelopment strategies. During this same time, the countywide planning authority was updating their plan, and they created the framework for the city to designate US 19 with activity center and multimodal corridor land use designations on the countywide plan, and then we were able to adopt those on our future land use map. These amendments really enabled the significant increases in development potentials that we have to ensure critical mass for transit supportive redevelopment, and required the city to put in place zoning standards that would support those objectives. I'm going to have a series of maps. Unfortunately, had a problem getting those with the PowerPoint, but I'll just use this as we go along. So the culmination of all of our work occurred in 2017 when Council adopted the US 19 zoning district and development standards and rezoned the entire corridor area, which spans almost 7 miles. It includes 1,600 acres in area and 4,600 parcels when you count all the condominiums. To implement the concepts of centers and corridors, 3 sub-districts were established in US 19, and you can see those outlined with the different colors on the map. And those sub-districts regulate use, development potential, height, and parking. Additionally, we have street frontage types and site design standards that regulate building and parking placement, vehicular and pedestrian circulation, landscaping, and stormwater. We also have some requirements for properties that are over 10 acres, and those mainly focus on the internal drive network and pedestrian and vehicular connectivity. As outlined in the staff report, the regional center, which is shown in dark blue, is the most intensive areas with an allowable FAR of 2.5 and a height of 150 feet. And our intentions with these areas are to have a more urban character, mixed-use buildings, and pedestrian-friendly streets. The neighborhood centers, which are shown in the light blue, have an FAR of 1.5 and a height of 70 feet. And these areas are really intended to be shopping and employment destinations. And then the corridor, which is the gold area, that allows an FAR of 1.5 and a height of 100 feet. And these areas are really where we'd like to see a wide range of employment-intensive development. I think it's important to know that when the zoning districts were created, we understood that based on the market study, our development entitlements were ambitious and maybe premature. However, we wanted to ensure that one day we could have the critical mass needed to support transit, and we also wanted to be able to compete with Tampa and St. Petersburg. So I'd like to talk now about the new construction that we are seeing. We've had a total of 15 projects that have been approved or someplace in the review process, and that accommodates 96 acres or 6% of the land area in the US 19 district. 7 projects have been built, and those are noted with the green dot. 6 are under construction, and those are with the blue dot, and then you'll see 2 that are pink, and those are still in the review phase. We've had 5 residential projects, 5 that are either retail or restaurant. We've had a hotel, an office development, a gas station, and then we have 2 large self-storage warehouses as a result of the developer-initiated code amendments addressed in the staff report. The 5 residential projects that you see here on the map are the most significant in terms of land area and impact. A total of 1,752 units will be constructed on 69 acres, or 4% of the land in the district. And these 5 developments represent 71% of the total acreage approved for new development. As you can see on the map, these projects are located in 2 of our sub-districts. 2 of those are located in the Clearwater Mall area over here, regional center, and then you can see that there is one in the corridor area north on the screen in the yellow. That is in the corridor north of Sunset Point, and then the other 2 are in the corridor area south of Gulf to Bay. To address the concerns about the amount of land being used and the loss of what may be considered some of our best redevelopment sites, I thought it might be helpful just to look and see and get a little more detail about those properties and projects. As you can see, 3 of these projects are replacing housing with housing. We had mobile home parks in these areas, and 2 of those 3 sites are also waterfront properties. Another project replaced an office building that I think we felt was at the end of their useful life, and that accounts for the 3rd waterfront site. And as you all know, waterfront property provides an unparalleled amenity for residential development and certainly commands a higher price than what other users could support. So I don't think it's really likely that these 3 parcels would have been developed with any other use. The other 2, however, are located on the frontage road and in corridors where we thought we had great potential for office sites, but we're just finding right now our market is not ready to support office at this time. While all these 5 projects are actually exceeding our 2030 housing projections by about 500 units, I don't think that the study could fully, back right when we were coming out of the recession, predict the factors that are influencing our market today, such as our sustained record of low interest rates, larger than usual influxes of people into Florida, and some shifting models in the workplace. To better understand the city's future housing needs, we take a look at the 2040 population projections that we have, and we determined that if we continue with our current household sizes, we're going to need about 4,600 additional housing units to meet that need. So it's very basic analysis, but if you look at what's being built now on US 19 and you subtract those out, the city's still going to need about 2,800 additional housing units. And at this point, the areas that we have planned for additional growth would be downtown and US 19. So I think it's fair to say we probably will be seeing some more residential development in this area. And in fact, we are already talking with 2 other developers about residential projects in the US 19 district. Regarding the office market, I think we provided you some information in the report from Economic Development and Housing that really lays out the reasons why we aren't attracting employment-based users at this time. The bottom line is they can't compete with the housing and self-storage developers who can pay more for the best sites. And while there are lower cost sites out there that office users could attain, there's really more issues that they have to deal with when a property is occupied and you have to, demolish the site, and then you might have to make some infrastructure improvements, and that's just not competitive with greenfield sites. So if you want to hear more about that, Denise obviously is here and she can answer any questions you might have about that. I think, Mayor, we agree with you. We would like to see some more mixed-use development and maybe some little more urban development projects. but we need the market to be there to support it. Transforming the 7-mile corridor is something that's not going to happen overnight. And I think we have to remember that the redevelopment cycle typically starts with the addition of new housing in that area, and obviously that is occurring here. And once people are here, living here, then typically you would find services and retail uses following, and then ultimately the job. The process takes time, and I know we have to be patient, and I think that's really where we are. We did spend a good bit of time thinking about what regulatory changes we could recommend that could maybe shift the market to attract some of these mixed use and employment uses. But we really, at this point, haven't identified changes that we think could really affect a lot of change. If we restrict residential uses, or we require a minimum threshold of FAR, or we require only mixed-use development, that really is not going to guarantee that we're going to get those tech jobs and office jobs that we so need and want in our community. What we are concerned about those is if we made some of those changes or we implemented a moratorium, that would just likely push development to locations outside of the city. Largo has already done planning work for US 19, and they're perfectly, the market is right for them to see some of that growth. So in considering what we might do, we went back to the US 19 plan for guidance, as it provided some implementation strategies in 4 different areas as we outlined in the staff report. Staff believes at this point there's 2 main areas that we should focus on, and that is in economic development and housing. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Denise, who's going to talk about recommendations related to economic development.
Thank you, Gina. Denise Anderson, Economic Development and Housing. So as you've seen in this report, we have some recommendations about our economic development competitiveness and some specific recommendations, and I'll kind of walk us through some of those things and give some additional context for those recommendations. So within that list, and they're not in the same order as presented in the report, we talked about ad valorem tax exemption. That is an incentive that is currently on the books. We have utilized it twice in our history. Once for heritage insurance back in 2013, and once for instrument transformers, a heavy industrial user. The ad valorem tax exemption program was adopted by voters prior to Pinellas County's ad valorem tax exemption, and at that time of both of those projects, we were not able to utilize the county's ad valorem as an additional boost for incentives. The county program is in place. It provides up to 100% of tax exemption for a period of up to 10 years on eligible projects, and that's on the increment that would result from a project. Similarly, the city's program is up to 75%. I make a recommendation that when we go for renewal this year, which I am recommending, it expires in November of this year, that we increase that exemption up to 100% as well. There would be some other changes, quite possibly, within that program that I would recommend when it comes to implementation. What we currently require is that we have an application, a project that has some specific outcomes, and we approve that project prior to it going under permit. The county's program is a little bit different in that they can provide that approval in advance of the specifics of the project. Additionally, I would recommend that we provide a pass-through. What I mean by that is for tenant-occupied buildings that the property owner must pass through the exemption to that tenant facility. I'll give you an example with Heritage Insurance. The property owner is Skylane Properties. The property owner passes that exemption onto Heritage, and the only reason we were able to approve that back in 2013 is because Skylane is an affiliate company of Heritage. Had that not occurred, we would not have been able to require, under our current enactment authority, that pass-through. So that is something I would suggest that should we go take this back out to voters, that we amend that within the enactment post-approval by the voters. As Gina mentioned, we do compete against greenfield sites. So if you think of Pasco County and points north, as well as eastern Hillsborough and other areas throughout the region, when we're talking about target industry users, we have to be very mindful of who we're competing against. And because we do not rely on foot traffic or even drive-by traffic for our target industry users, we must look at it from a broader perspective, therefore regionally. And so competing against greenfield sites, the recommendation here is that we consider incentives that bring us to parity. So when we're talking about demolition, perhaps cleanup, or infrastructure changes, a lot of those additional costs are really a discouraging factor when trying to attract target industries. Recommendation specifically is perhaps consider a dedicated funding source so that we have those funds available to take care of those parity-related issues, demolition and otherwise. We're competing as well against urbanized markets. So think here perhaps West Shore as an example. And so public investment often leads private investment, and so the suggestion here, the recommendation is that we catalyze the market by making an investment that really gets the attention of developers. We, as you saw in our market analysis, we think we're well positioned to compete against West Shore when it comes, in the regional subdistrict, when it comes to form and density. And we believe that as the market is expanding beyond the cores of the city of Tampa and St. Pete, that the US 19 corridor is very well positioned to compete in that regard. However, I do believe that we need to make some significant investment for select sites in order to change this, to catalyze and change the narrative a bit in terms of our commitment to economic development. And so a suggestion here is a TIF-like policy to reinvest along the corridor. There are some challenges with establishing a TIF, but a TIF-like policy is indeed quite possible. Additionally, some placemaking and other types of amenities might be necessary to encourage that mixed-use development that we've been talking about. And then as we move along, providing guidance, a big component of what we do when we analyze projects for incentives is we look at the fiscal and incentive analysis. And we utilize a tool, the one that we use is Impact Data Source. It provides information to us that is very helpful in our analysis, and that includes fiscal and incentive analysis. And what would be I think a very helpful goal for me as we move forward is to understand where the council sits in terms of its risk tolerance, what it anticipates and expects for payback period and return on investment. And so I would encourage the establishment of goals in that regard as we consider incentives for certain projects. One of the recommendations within the US 19 plan was to encourage the creation of business or property owners groups along the corridor. I would suggest that they be considered in context with the wayfinding districts that Gina will talk about in a little bit. But perhaps it would be appropriate as we redevelop the corridor that we consider supporting groups in those sub-districts. And I'm talking about marketing districts, not to be confused with our zoning sub-districts. Penny for Pinellas 4 was approved by the county, by voters within the county a couple of years ago. I sat on the Joint Review Committee as we established the guidelines for the 8.3% set aside that was a part of the Penny for Pinellas. This is an estimated $160 million over a 10-year period, of which approximately $80 million is to be used for economic development related goals. Currently, the county has an employment sites program which requires that a developer, property owner, or end user is the applicant for those funds. Two additional programs, that program is on the books, and in fact, the county is reopening a third round for solicitation of applications. Those funds can be used for new construction, expansion, rehabilitation of office and industrial space. But additionally, within that Penny for Pinellas guidelines were two additional programs. Site readiness program has not yet been created. The government, local, municipal, or county government would be the applicant for those funds. Capital projects for publicly led land assembly and or site prep would be an appropriate use of those funds. Additionally, it would be used for the creation of publicly owned development-ready office and industrial sites. And then thirdly, the public infrastructure program as well, not yet been created, would allow for capital projects for publicly led infrastructure. This would include stormwater, water, wastewater, roadway access improvements, and new construction. For both of these programs under the Penny for Pinellas, I would encourage council to encourage the county to establish those programs so that we can access those for appropriate use. As it relates to our marketing efforts, we have developed within our department significant concept marketing activities. to market the advantages of the corridor, to promote the opportunities and the density and intensity that we wish to seek. Of the activities that we've been engaged in, just in the last 3 months, we've had 75 targeted engagements with site selectors, brokers, developers, and what I would refer to as influencers, so land use attorneys, architects, engineers, and the like. We also have a direct email campaign reaching over 3,600 site selectors. This is a vetted list that we pay for and communicate with, and obviously the intent there is to drive engagement and response on those email campaigns. Additionally, we have 400 local brokers, lenders, attorneys, property managers, and others that we engage through with a separate email campaign. We recently completed a business journals promotion, so I'm sure all of you are familiar with Tampa Bay Business Journal as an example. The business journal is around the country, and we worked with the business journals to promote in 6 markets outside of our region a number of different marketing efforts. And we found those 6 markets over a 6-month period were Cincinnati, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, the San Jose or Silicon Valley area, and New York City. We had the greatest click-through rate and time on page with Cincinnati and Philadelphia, and so we'll explore that a little bit further as we continue to market in those communities and likely others. And then, of course, we're members of local, regional, and national groups. ULI, NAIOP, and CREW are examples of those. And are active participants in conferences and trade shows. So we very often participate with Pinellas County Economic Development on some of those activities taking place throughout the country. Toronto, hopefully this year, if we're able to travel. Chicago as well. New York City may be on the list, and others. And then, of course, right here on the local level. And then finally, we pay for some business intelligence through CoStar, GIS, WebTech, and others. And so we'd like to continue, of course, utilizing that data to provide intelligence for us as we look at our market. We have subject matter expertise in-house to do market analysis and case studies, and we'd like to continue those efforts. And then finally, revisit the wayfinding recommendations within the US 19 plan, specifically the work that MERGE did, and Gina outlined some of the challenges we've had in implementing that. And with this, I'd like to turn it over to Gina, and she'll wrap up with some transportation-related initiatives.
Okay, so as Denise said, she mentioned about maybe resurrecting the wayfinding plan. And while I did provide you a good bit of information about the work that we had done, I don't think I clearly articulated what FDOT's objective was. And I think that they believe their position was that wayfinding is for downtowns and not for other areas. And if we could actually get them past that position, they also articulated some concerns that our branding for the US 19 district would somehow conflict with their signage for the actual US 19, and they had concerns about safety and confusion amongst drivers. We do not agree with their interpretation of the MUTCD standards, which govern community wayfinding, and in fact, we presented District 7 when we met with them. Mr. Horn came along with us, and the secretary was there with his lead staff, and we showed them a wayfinding program that had been approved in Daytona, which is very similar to ours, and it included on some state roadways. We also pointed out that that particular wayfinding project was a FDOT LAP-funded project, and the city received $465,000 in support of it. I do have some graphics, if you're interested, to show you what we have developed. When we started the US 19 wayfinding program, it really expanded then to a citywide wayfinding program because it's so important to link all of our visitors and residents from district to district in the city. And in fact, downtown is already moving forward with their portion of that plan. So, Mayor, would you like to see the graphics or not? Okay. And again, I apologize. Somehow I overwrote a file and didn't have all of these for the PowerPoint. So as you can see, we came up with logos. Now, the only one I think that really hasn't been truly vetted was the one for Clearwater Beach. But we have our city brand, which governs everything that we do in the city, and then we created some unique identifiers for all of our other main districts. The other thing FDOT did not agree with was that US 19 was a district. We tried to tell them that we have planned for it, we have zoning regulations for it, but they said no, it's just a corridor and it is not an identifiable district in their minds. So this is the concept that each area would have it, and then we developed gateway entry signs. You can see we have the city Welcome to Clearwater sign that you all have already approved, and those are going to be erected hopefully later in the year. And then here you can see the type of signs that we were hoping to get on the frontage roads that would brand the different areas along. We could also do a variety of things with banners and street signs. There's lots of opportunities. Here again you see how cohesive this wayfinding program would be to link visitors and residents throughout the entire city. Here's some more specific to US 19. So this, though, is the map from Daytona. And as you can see, they have specific districts, not just a downtown. And then they have also branded just as Clearwater intended to the different brands. And you can see we have...
Can you go back to that last, where they had different districts? What is the road that is adjacent to all those?
Well, it goes through a bunch of different areas. LPG Boulevard is included. A1A is included. It goes throughout the district. But the one that goes
from my right to my left, do you know,
I think that's...
is I-95 between Speedway and LPGA, or?
Looks like it.
I'm assuming that the...
I can't read this map. I'm sorry, I can't see the letters. All I know is that I looked at all of the streets where they were going to place signage, and there were multiple state roadways, including A1A, LPG Boulevard. Let's see here. I think I had some more of them listed.
But to me, it looks like it might be equivalent to 19 in Gulf to Bay.
That distance, our consultants measured it, and it's really from bay to beach. It would be the length of Gulf to Bay is the amount of space between the beach and the edge of the LPGA Boulevard district.
Okay.
So it's very similar. So we even went back and tried to craft something where we could take our original concept and maybe massage it a little bit so that it could fit this model. We didn't have anything that was quite in between, say, US 19 down and downtown. That was the one area. But there was just really no opening to move it forward. So here, just again, you can see doing exactly what we intended to do with all the different districts, and then, they've already gotten some of these in the ground. So,
was Mr. Gwynn the secretary at the time?
He had just started,
okay.
And he was in attendance at the meeting, but it was really right at the beginning of his administration. So that's really where we are. I mean, I think if you all are interested in us resurrecting this and try to move it forward again, maybe there's been some changes in the few years that we haven't had contact with FDOT. They did come back to us to talk about the potential for exit numbering, because we thought anything would be helpful to help our traveling public navigate the corridor. And they were willing to consider a pilot program to assign exit numbers instead of so that people could brand and advertise around those numbers. But they required us to go to the other cities along the corridor to get buy-in. And then if we were able to get buy-in from that, then we were going to need to go to the business communities and all of the areas. And I'm disappointed to say that we did not get full support from our other partners along US 19, and so we just didn't move forward. So As I said, if you'd like us to pursue it, we certainly think it's of great value in helping us define and have some public improvements in branding. But if not, we could maybe consider and see how effective our program could be if we can't make use of the state rights of way. I just don't know how effective that would be, but that would be the alternative. Our last group of recommendations is centered around transportation, and I know we've spent a lot of time, so I don't think I'm going to go through all of those. I think the key takeaway with our transportation is that we have to improve our roadways so that people are comfortable driving, walking, and biking. And if they're not, we're really not going to achieve the things that we want to achieve here. But because we don't control a lot of right-of-way, I think our recommendations are all about supporting our agency partners and their efforts to improve US 19, and we've listed those, working with FDOT on some of their work. The Drew Street project contained improvements in the Drew Street US 19 area, primarily related to pedestrians all around the college and around our stadium. That's something we'd like to see support of. We also have some recommendations related to working with PSTA to approve bus shelters and that sort of thing. But at this point, I think I'd like to stop and then let you all have the floor, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Clayton. Mr. Delk, you were a big part of this. Do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Mr. Jennings, before I open it up to questions, do you have anything?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Questions, comments? Can somebody refresh my memory on what the vote passed by for the incentives for the ad valorem exemption? Was that close, or was it?
It was back in 2012, as you know,
Right.
and I did not look at it, but I believe it's somewhere around 71%, but I would have to confirm that. That's a guess at this
And
point.
all it needs is a majority?
It does.
Okay. I just want to know what we're getting into when we renew it, if it was close or by going from 75 to 100%.
I should add that I've had a conversation with Pinellas County, and as you know, once we put something on referendum, the staff is not able to advocate for passage. We can educate but cannot advocate. Pinellas County Economic Development has committed to advocating on our behalf, which I think would be incredibly helpful.
Okay. And then, you all talked about East Tampa and Pasco. They do not have the benefit of proximity to TIA that I think our US 19 plan has. How much do we market that? How much of a factor is it in relocation?
Well, in Pasco County, you now have the Suncoast Parkway and the HOV lanes, which have really opened up that proximity. You also have a lot of residential along that way. And so it's less of an argument for us now than it used to be 10, 15 years ago. The concern that we hear about most often are the number of lights from TIA over to, for instance, the beach or to 19. The construction along US 19 and the Tampa Expressway, once that is complete, it's important to note that you'll be able to travel from Curlew Road all the way down through our southern counties without a single stoplight. You'll be able to get over to Tampa in that same way as well. And so I think the timing is really good. And then, of course, the more direct route is Memorial Causeway and, the Courtney Campbell Causeway and Memorial Boulevard. So those are more direct routes over to TIA. Certainly, it's a 15-minute drive in great traffic. It could be more difficult at other times, but certainly when you're going to downtown Tampa from the airport, you can face those same restrictions. So I think there's an opportunity there for us to promote it, but there's some realities out of Pasco County now with the improvements that they've made that I think are a bit challenging. Pasco County also has a Ready Sites program that they've implemented, and as you've probably seen with a recent announcement, it's been a successful endeavor for them. That's not a program that we currently have.
So is most of the development up in Pasco around 52 and 54?
It has, it's certainly around 54, and it's migrated up to 52. I would say Hernando now is a part of this conversation. It didn't used to be, again, 10, 15 years ago. But that Suncoast Parkway, opening that all the way up and through Hernando County has opened up the competitive landscape quite a bit.
Do you know how many miles it is, though, up to 54?
I used to work right on 54 in Suncoast Parkway, and we used to tout all the time it was a 20-minute drive to the airport, and that was before HOV.
And where is the Moffett complex going in up in Pasco?
So if you're familiar with Pasco, the Ridge Road extension now is opened up, and that connects over to the Suncoast Parkway. So it's from the Ridge Road extension north to 52, and permitted in there at 7,000 units. A lot of light industrial space and mixed use. It's a big project, and of course Moffett is to anchor that.
It's about 300 acres.
Much larger than that. Oh, Moffett itself?
Moffett.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cap rates aren't going to go up this year and next, so, you know, we were talking about how competitive that makes the apartments, but that is going to be changing. You know, talk a little bit more about setting goals, because I agree with us setting goals, and the quantitative goals are easy, but I think we need qualitative goals too. Those aren't quite as easy, and they're not quite as easy to measure. But they can actually be more important, I think, because we are looking for that live, work, play. Can you be a little more specific on some of the goals you and staff, Ms. Clayton, have discussed?
Sure. So as we look at the sub-districts along 19, we see that the corridor area is probably most similar to the Feather Sound area, you know, the gateway area in Pinellas County. So we see a lot of opportunity there for single-use tenancy of large finance, insurance, and other types of firms. 19 now allows for research and technology as well as light industrial. I don't see a lot of light industrial perhaps, but research and technology is an opportunity I certainly think that we should be pursuing. And within the regional sub-districts, there are two. That's the Drew Street, Gulf to Bay, and the Clearwater Mall, the Countryside Mall area, formerly known as Westfield Countryside. Those areas provide us the greatest density, and it's intended to be very urbanized. So that one is very similar, in my view, to the West Shore market. And as we know, the Midtown Tampa area is really pushing the office environment for Tampa. The Midtown development. And so I believe strongly that the US 19 corridor really is next. And a lot of the engagement that we're having with our site selectors, developers, and brokers is that they're recognizing that they need to find new markets. In terms of the qualitative type of pursuits is I think if we focus on those placemaking or mixed use opportunities. So now we're talking multiple developers, right? So we're talking about horizontal developer that can bring in those vertical developments. And so that's a lot of partners to bring to the table, and those become very complex deals. And I'm talking about, of course, in that regional sub-district. And so we have to have a way to have a conversation with those developers that brings all of these elements together so that they can feel confident. The greatest challenge in attracting development is surety and predictability within the marketplace. And I think conversations like this are a little bit frightening. So I think we need to be fully committed, and we need to certainly establish programs and incentives that people can access when they follow certain rules. So perhaps we have a minimum FAR, perhaps we have mixed use requirements. These are all things that you all can talk about. But once we can articulate that and deliver that with that surety and predictability, I think we'll be far more successful. But that requires that all of you can build consensus around those things and understand the value of economic development, what it truly brings to a community that is generating wealth, not only for the businesses, hopefully, that occupy those facilities, but for those employees that work there, for the wages that they garner, for the reinvestment they make in their own communities, their children, and their schools. So all of those things are conversations that we need to be able to have. And I think the Landings project, quite frankly, taught me a lot. I don't think the community was prepared for a conversation about what economic development is and what it is not. And some of the comments that I heard during that run-up to the referendum really came home to me that we need to do a lot of education within our own community. Comments like, we're just tourism, or those jobs are for places like St. Pete and Tampa. Comments like those, I think, are really eye-opening. And so we have to have a marketing campaign that not only deals with all of those folks that we hope invest here, but I think we have to have an education campaign with our residents as well, so that they understand the value and the risks of not pursuing high-quality development and high-quality jobs.
Why did you say these are frightening conversations?
Because when we talk about a moratorium without understanding what it is that we intend to achieve with a moratorium, I think that causes an immediate concern. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have one. It means that if we don't know what it is we're attempting to achieve by implementing one and are able to competently articulate that to the development community, then I think it takes a long time to rebuild a reputation if we remove that predictability and surety.
Well, we wouldn't have had this conversation at all had I not raised a moratorium. So I think it was productive, and I'm not frightened by it one little bit. Talk a little bit more about a TIF and
Sure.
what the process would be should we want to institute it, what the roadblocks and hurdles are.
Sure, and I'll ask our city attorney, David Margolis, to jump in here, if you will. We looked at a TIF. We looked at Portland's program. The state of Maine allows cities to create TIFs for certain economic development activities. We looked at throughout the state, and the state has several TIFs outside of CRA in various counties. And in conversation with Mr. Margolis, learned that the cities do not have those same authorities in creating a TIF. And so our opportunities to create a TIF are to establish a CRA. That would mean a findings of blight and slum along the corridor or in areas along the corridor. We could also establish a CDD or special assessment areas. And we could instead have a policy, an administrative policy, whereby we look at the US 19 zoning district and do a calculation every year. What have we gained in property values, and do we wish to set aside funds as a sort of TIF-like administrative policy that gets put into a fund for economic development purposes? The challenge with that, perhaps, is as councils change over time, that policy could then change over time. And so that fund could, in fact, be at risk, or we might not wish to bond against it, or other kinds of things. So I'll let Mr. Margolis respond more fully to that question about TIFs.
I don't have much else to add. I generally agree with that, but just to qualify the remarks a little bit, what Ms. Anderson and I talked about was the purpose of those funds, and if I understand correctly, the primary purpose, or at least the heavy spend from those funds, would be for the acquisition of real estate. And is that
acquisition and investment?
Right.
Sure.
So with that being the case, I would say that our broad universe of options would include creating a CRA district, also a community development district, which would function similar to DDB. So it would be an independent special district. They would have the ability to levy millage directly. The advantage of that system is that it does not come out of your general fund because it would be on top of it. The disadvantage, of course, is that they're levying additional millage, and that may not be very popular with some of the property owners there. Third option, as Ms. Sanderson pointed out, would be special assessments. If we're making improvements along the corridor, that would also be appropriate and justified. And then also, I agree with Ms. Sanderson that if council simply wants to set aside money in the general fund, TIF really is general fund money. It's property taxes. And so council always has the power to just set it aside as part of the budget. So that would be the universe of options when it comes to funding the acquisition of real estate primarily and secondarily for investment.
I'll note as well, those additional programs under Penny for Pinellas, the site readiness and public infrastructure programs, though they may not require a city match or a public match, it is strongly encouraged in a competitive application cycle. So having the ability to pull funds from a funding source to match or support an application for those kinds of investments would be an important aspect to consider as well.
Do you have a budget for advertising and promoting this area? Because I think we need to do more, and I think we need to figure out who we're truly targeting. I don't know about marketing in LA, frankly. I see us more as a Midwest, Northeast, very similar to where we market with our TDC money.
Agreed. We chose a couple of wild cards, Silicon Valley and LA, for that reason, is really to see how we would benchmark against some of those other markets that we're in. We had the opportunity to choose 6 within the program that we utilize with the business journals, and so for that reason we chose a couple of other wild cards. Certainly we know that California businesses are fleeing in some cases to other states, Florida being one of them, Texas being primarily.
Texas and Arizona being the 2 primary.
Yeah. There is, when you look at leads coming from other areas of the country, certainly the Northeast, and I'm talking about within the state of Florida, certainly the Northeast is where a lot of businesses are migrating from. We are seeing them on the West Coast, though, as well. Not as prevalent, but.
But I mean, you've seen Dynasty and ARC move to St. Petersburg, you know, Dynasty 10 years ago, I think, or 8. Mm-hmm. And then ARC this past year. So they're coming. I don't know that the cities had much to do with that.
Yeah.
But I think we could do a better job. How are you measuring that, though? I mean, what were the metrics that you got back from San Jose and LA?
Hold on just a moment, I have that with me. In terms of the budget, you asked that question about the budget. Mm-hmm. It's currently around $100,000. That does not include a dedicated employee. I'm sure most of you, all of you rather, have met Phil Kirkpatrick. This is virtually his entire world, is the US 19 corridor, and he was hired for that purpose. In terms of the Tampa Bay Business Journal's campaign, so what we looked at, this was, the campaign ended in mid-December. About 600,000 in terms of impressions. We looked at the click-through rate in comparison, and there were many others. We outperformed Pinellas County as an example with the markets that they chose, significantly outperformed. The page views, dwell time, things of that nature are all of the things that this is a digital content delivery. So we looked at the SEO and SEM metrics. This data was provided to us by the business journals. We significantly outperformed in Cincinnati and Philadelphia in all aspects, and that includes in all aspects of the native content performance. Social performance as well, very similar on Facebook and Twitter because this went across multiple platforms. Again, we saw greater engagement out of those 2 markets specifically. We looked at the demographics of those users. Who is it that's looking at our content? We found that they were 3.7 times more likely to be a finance decision maker, 2.5 times more likely to be HR, 2.1 times more likely to be a C-level exec, and 1.3 times more likely to be a small business owner. We also looked at brand awareness, so we had about 670 hours of brand awareness within that campaign, and overall we're reaching executives typically in the demographic profile for income of 100 to 250,000. It gets a little stronger above 150,000 in terms of who was looking at our content. And that, I would say, is fairly typical of business journals themselves. Those are the readers quite often of business journals, and so that information did not surprise us necessarily, but we were happy to see that it was consistent with demographics we would expect to see.
Vice Mayor?
Well, I'm looking at this from a little different perspective because I look at, as it says in the report, housing usually comes first, and then other uses, follow in line. at some point, and I agree with you, you know, seeing all these apartments, new apartments going up and other ones in the works, I don't know where what land and what locations are going to be available for the accessory uses, but I also not sure that a moratorium would do anything other than postpone the inevitable development. But yeah, we also talk about storage units, and I know we you know, staff hates storage units. I'm not a big fan, but I rent one. I've got one. Most apartment dwellers have a storage unit. I would think, you know, some of the new apartment, if I was going to develop a new apartment complex, I would plan for storage units for those people and include that as, you know, put the cost of that storage unit in their rent. But I also say, you know, I'm a free market person. The market will dictate what goes on, and if there's so many apartments out there getting built, and there's not enough bodies to occupy them, what's going to be the end result there? Rents are going to come back down a little bit. When they can't put bodies in the buildings, rents come down. So there's a balance there, and I think the market itself will take care of it. But I think the plan is, I think our US 19 plan in concept is good, and like it says in the report, it hasn't been in place long enough to really get an accurate feel for it. But at this time, I don't see the advantage to a moratorium, just because I ultimately think a moratorium, all it's going to do is postpone the inevitable development of these apartments. And when they build apartments, people are going to look for a smaller parcel to build some storage units on. It's inevitable probably, but I don't know that we can dictate the market.
Why'd you do the U.S. plan in the first place then?
Well, we didn't foresee all of this, but you know, I know Denise mentioned what's the development down Feather Sound, the Gateway. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Gateway development was green space development. It was, and had very few owners. It had one major owner who owned almost all of that land at one point, and that makes a difference. We have how many thousands of parcels here with how many, you know, how many different property owners. We are developed. We're a fully developed city. We don't have green space, much green space left for development, and things are going to be different when that's the program. Pasco County, I mean Largo, for instance, Largo still has some green space. We don't, and so it's a different game.
Some of you may recall the Heritage Insurance Project. The greatest challenge in locating Heritage, they relocated from St. Pete, and at that time they had committed to creating 50 jobs, right? So now they're hundreds of jobs, 700 I believe. Heritage Insurance and locating to that facility, and acquiring and locating to that facility, their primary concern in doing so was the parking. And that's where our ad valorem tax exemption was focused, is providing them a tax exemption on the investment in that tri-level parking deck that sits between $2,600 and $2,650. But the real challenge along all of US 19 with our office product is that they were all built in the late 80s, primarily, with very little parking. That's when everybody had big server rooms, big conference rooms, big private offices, and occupancy within those buildings was 1 person to every 250 square feet on average. In today's marketplace, it's pushing very close to 100 square feet per employee. KnowBe4 is a great example of that. It's at 125, pushing toward 100. It used to be you only saw that in call centers, right? Because this society, our community, still relies on having our own personal mode of transportation, parking is a huge challenge within our office buildings. So one of the great premises behind US 19 is that we've put things closer to the street, more urbanized form, interconnected parcels, bus rapid transit, all of those things that hopefully come along with that redevelopment, that changes the game a little bit in terms of what we can redevelop and the density in which we can do it. Right now, it's very difficult to lease our current product out there. Not enough parking for the types of uses that folks are wanting to do in those buildings. Just doesn't make fiscal sense for them.
Councilmember Beckman.
So I have a whole bunch, but not enough parking. Even with kind of the shift in office culture with as a result of COVID and people, you know, working remotely part of the time, I would think that that would lessen up the demand on parking a little bit. But, you know, I guess we'll see as we
Yeah, we just don't know how permanent that shift is going to be. Phil Kirkpatrick did some analysis on that based on some sort of anecdotal evidence, if you will, that folks in NAOP or ULI were talking about a 28% space reduction in lease-ups and what that would mean within multi-tenant facilities and how to address that as a property owner, as an example. So, but we don't know if that's a sustained 28% drop. And I think anybody would tell you nobody knows. So, not sure. Time will tell.
So first of all, I really appreciate this report that was written by the planning department. It was, it gave me a better understanding and the historical perspective. So I have a couple of things. So you know, US 19 is busy. It's located nicely between our city and other cities. It's easy to access from the airport. And we want affordable housing. We want housing on rapid transit areas so that people can easily get on and off or get the bus, right? Affordable housing. It's interesting that the first housing developments are the primo locations to get rent by the water. So, okay, that's done. But we also want high-paying jobs in that corridor as well. So it's that balance. And so a couple of things that I took away from the summary is, well, number one, we don't want to have all housing out there or more housing out there to make us kind of a bedroom community and take away from that limited space for higher paying jobs. It would be great to have banking. It would be great to have insurance, medical, technology, a corporate headquarters, you know, something like Kraft, Mondelez, you know, something, Heinz, have their corporate headquarters here would be wonderful. I had a couple of comments on so we've got here, US 19 is poised to benefit from the development that's in Tampa. The Tampa Bay MSA continues to rebound. The first project will likely become catalytic to further development on US 19 and likely will be the precursor of an office building boom centered along US 19 from Gulf to Bay to SR 580. So my margin note is, how can we heavily incentivize this? And maybe this meeting is a little scary because we're using the word moratorium, and I'm not at this point in favor of any moratorium, mostly because of the message it sends, like we're stopping, we're not going to do anything now, and then people, developers who are ready to go are going to go somewhere else. But I do think, even by having the meeting with the word moratorium, it lets the community know that we are serious about what's going on US 19. These are our collective intentions and sending a message that this is what we want. And so if we're saying we really want this first project will likely become the catalytic, become catalytic to further development, where is that little magic business? And how can we say the first in line to get approved gets this grand prize and these incentives? You know, can we do that, something like that? So that's one question. I don't know if you want to address that first, and then I had just a couple more, but.
Well, I think it would be a policy decision amongst you all, certainly. But what that could look like is, you know, acquiring a site. It could be partnering with a privately owned site to make those infrastructure improvements, perhaps demolition and other things. And certainly there would have to be commitment on the part of that property owner and developer on the types of uses that would then go into that. You know, you don't want to make public investment that does not yield the type of benefit that you're seeking. So, you know, recapture clauses are quite common in that respect. So, as I said, you could acquire a site and hold it for a desired use. I know in Pinellas County, that was something that certainly in Penny for Pinellas, that's an opportunity that is allowed within that program, is acquisition of sites for desired use. It was certainly within our 2011 Economic Development Strategic Plan as well, is to acquire sites for desired use. Also within that is to preserve sites for desired use in terms of our zoning. US 19 allows for that, but it also allows for a lot of other things within that zoning district. And that's the challenge that we're seeing here, right? So you can put an office there, or you can put multifamily development there, or many other things like light industrial, retail, etc. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think some of the, you know, all of these recommendations about set aside funds for certain activities, I certainly am not a fan of making investment for job creation, in other words, paying for jobs. I think that time has gone. That was very popular in the 90s and early 2000s, but I think making investment in things that stay with us, even if conditions of that tenant business change and they move on after a period of time, making investment in infrastructure, making investment in property, making investment in cleanup activities or what have you. I think all of those things are important to consider.
I agree. And along those lines, I have, you know, we've talked a little bit about the wayfinding and the disappointment with FDOT in not allowing us to do that. And I would say perhaps we, you know, rally the troops and put forth a campaign similar to what we did to get funding for our the bus transit station on Court and Myrtle, and get all of our community partners to really put pressure on FDOT. I mean, we can have neighborhood associations, residents say, we need this, we understand that this is important. And, you know, I mean, I'm willing to step up and put pressure. It doesn't, from what's been described, it doesn't seem fair that it's allowed in that Daytona area and not here. And somebody needs to answer some questions about why that is. The other thing is, we've got, I had a, so when we go and ask for, we've got, the county may consider investment in the forms of grants, forgivable loans, etc. To date, no project in the US 19 district has utilized either of the incentives. Do you know why not?
Sure, those are companies. The current program approved with Pinellas County is the one that requires the business, property owner, or developer to be the applicant, and we just simply haven't seen qualifying projects come forward. We would write a letter of support for those that would apply, perhaps, but...
and we would have directed them there as well,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh, I had so under the economic development competitiveness, there were a couple things. Market Pinellas County's employment sites program to existing and new businesses and to developers, and then continue the economic development housing department's targeted marketing activities, and I think the mayor discussed that. But we've also got encourage property business owners to develop a business organization or establish organizations around geographic areas. And that would be to partner with Amplify, right?
Quite possibly,
And
sure.
here, you know, for me as, you know, the most visible environmentalist up here, is there a way to utilize Greenprint and those goals as well as the goals that the county has adopted and other municipalities around us have adopted to really put a unique spin on reaching out to employers with green industries or something that sets us aside as the beach community, the premier beach community with jobs that complement our goals and the county's goals? I think that's a big opportunity.
Sure. So, you know, when we're talking about health, wellness, and sustainability within the community, we know that CEOs resonate with that message because that's what their employees care about.
Yep.
And so we do have opportunity there. Certainly, it's not one that we've fully explored, but that certainly can be a part of that communication. Those email campaigns, if you will, and otherwise, because for CEOs, we know that that's an important component. I think the great challenge for us in really delivering that message is in part the fact that we do not have a solid public transportation system here. And so it's very difficult to sort of walk that walk, no pun intended, when a key element perhaps is missing in some of that decision-making from those CEOs. But I think the messaging that this is where we are and where we're headed and what we're committed to is an important component.
I think the beach, you know, is a unique asset for us that no one else has, that we need to look at how we can utilize that and do good in multiple ways. And I think I guess that's all I've got right now.
Councilmember Albritton.
Yeah, I have a few things. You know, when we first looked at the developing the US 19 corridor for basically a retail core, you know, 70% of the commercial land was dedicated to retail, 25% office, 5% industrial flex. That was a good vision, and I think that we still try to maintain that as best we can. I know the market, you can't legislate the market, it comes in, but the way I see it, we are stewards of the development on US 19, and we'd like to see it go through. Now, I know people, one of the concerns is these storage centers, you know, just going out of control. As far as I know, we've got 2 of them, and as far as I know, they were on awkwardly kind of weird shaped lots, and I do think it fills a need. I don't think there's going to be a bunch of them that are going to be approved to go everywhere up and down US 19, but you also got to understand that Florida's getting a big influx of people from the north coming down with all their stuff, and they've got basements up there, you know. They don't know that when they move to Florida that all that stuff that's in their basement's got to go somewhere. So I do think that it fills a need. Even with me, I never even knew what a basement was till about 30 years ago, and I went up and I go, wow. You know, again, I still have a storage unit for some of my stuff. When this was first brought up and the word moratorium was mentioned, it really made me shocked because I'm probably the only one on the dais here that's been through. I was in business in the 70s, and I saw when the first moratorium came in the 70s, the effect that it had on the building industry, because I was in it. And the first effect was almost like a shock wave on an atomic bomb that goes out throughout the community, and not just a little community. I mean, it goes out regionally, saying, do not come here, we don't want anything. And developers, it's hard to have that come back, and it doesn't just happen like 1 year and then they come roaring back. I mean, when developers and builders know there's been a moratorium, it's not a good thing. But I do appreciate the mayor bringing this up because, like I said, we are stewards of the development there, and if that wasn't brought up, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And I want to give kudos to this plan here is and online, everybody should read this because it's got a lot of information and it gives a lot of ideas in here on where we should be going on the US 19 corridor. It's a very important corridor for development, probably more important than anywhere in Clearwater because it's going to tie everything from the beaches to Tampa, and it is going to tie people, communities from the north and the south together. So I appreciate that we are talking about this, but I want to get the message out. If we are not going to have it, we are not going to have a moratorium because that will stop that shock wave that even if we don't do it, it's still out there. So I think maybe one of the opportunities, and I like the wayfinding sign idea, and I think that needs to be brought to DOT again, and I could be, since I represent Clearwater on the Fort Pinellas board, I'd like to take this to Fort Pinellas because if we need support from our south and our north communities, we can make that happen there. And if it's on a plan that goes through Fort Pinellas and we have regional, people can make it happen, DOT will go with it. I think we ought to give it another chance to go through. I think we have a good leader in DOT now that listens to our needs, and I think we can make that happen. So I'm going to bring it forward if Clearwater would like to Fort Pinellas and see if we can talk about, getting the DOT on board with that. So.
Councilmember Beckman, you mentioned those business or organizational groups. Those 5 or 6 colors of the various sorts of districts in the wayfinding program, that's really what I was referring to in terms of recommending that they coalesce, if we're able to implement, around sort of those district areas, the countryside area as an example. They can leverage marketing activities and the like in doing so. So that's what that is referring to. I'd also be remiss, Gina is probably jumping in her chair. Self-storage is allowed, I think, in the corridor sub-district. Is that correct, Gina?
Yeah, thanks. I was going to try to address the self-storage. So we do, as Denise said, allow self-storage in the corridor areas. We do not allow it in the neighborhood center. And then the 2 amendments that were done limited the availability of use to self-storage. All 3 of those sites have come forward. Obviously, 2 are under construction. We had another one that was in permitting, but they couldn't make it work. We were not supportive of it, and they ultimately withdrew the application. We do know that there's people out there still looking for self-storage. I think that it may, we may have some other people want to come back in and ask you to amend the code. I don't know. We'll see what happens. One of the things that we did in downtown, because of what we were seeing on US 19, is that we allowed self-storage, but only if it was an accessory use to a multifamily project. I don't know what the legal implications might be under Pert Harris of pulling back some of our self-storage regulations. If you are interested in us looking into that, I think it's an issue we'll have to discuss with legal about maybe pulling back some of the uses that are allowed and make sure we don't get ourselves in any trouble with that. But if you're interested, there are some things that we might be able to do to shift the self-storage narrative a little bit.
Are they getting the benefits of the extra development rights?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. In fact,
So can we pull it back to what would be allowed under our normal code? Can you be that prescriptive?
again, I think there's a big legal question to put in place. And in fact, I do want to point out that the one self-storage unit that's beside Dick's Sporting Good used TDRs in addition to the 2.5 FAR. They got TDRs from a stormwater pond owned by FDOT. And in fact, the other project that withdrew also was getting TDRs. So they're maxing out a 2.5 FAR. And they have virtually no parking requirement because of the code amendments that were passed. Obviously, they don't generate parking, but still, that just enables them to put more and more on the site.
Councilmember Albrecht.
But both of those projects are mixed use?
I would, I would say in name they are mixed use. We'll see actually if they have any users occupy the space. I think that you see a lot of issues going on out across the country. In fact, we just saw an article about this issue and about the ability to fill mixed-use space in a lot of projects. So I guess time will tell whether they actually complete it. I mean, on paper, yes, but it's only maybe 5,000, 4,000 square feet. It's very minimal. It's not what I would consider very meaningful.
Councilmember Bunker.
Thank you. And thank you again for the report. As I was reading it, it's a terrific report. I was thinking this is not a case of if you build it, they will come. We're in the situation of if we plan it, will they build? So all those incentives that we're talking about, I think are going to be really important. The wayfinding objections, was that because FDOT thought that this is going to lead to everybody up and down all the corridors asking for their own signage?
That did come up in our conversations as well. I guess my preference would be to approach this as a city matter because we already have a plan developed and we'd like to move forward, but that was one of the concerns they articulated, that we don't need wayfinding everywhere. Wayfinding is not something that should be, and I think we just have a very fundamental philosophical disagreement with them.
Those were really nice designs, though.
Thank you. Yeah, our consultants worked hard on it, and we'll see the benefits in downtown because at least that portion of the project is moving forward.
Any other questions or comments? Well, I see a way forward. I know I got everyone wrangled, which I don't apologize for. We've talked about moratoriums 2 other times in the history of the city that I've been on the council. We didn't necessarily do them, but it always fostered some real good conversations. Fortunately, one of the times we discussed it, it did change the trajectory of the area that we were concerned with, which was conversion of hotels into condominiums on the beach, where we wanted to keep a tourist environment. That doesn't mean that we don't want condos, but we didn't want to lose the overnight accommodations, which is really an economic driver. So I think there's some good things that have been recommended by staff. I want to start to talk with the city manager about next steps that we can follow through and maybe refine the US 19 plan. I too believe in the market, Vice Mayor, but I also believe we are at a disadvantage because we do not have greenfield. And we do have special incentives throughout this city that you have voted for.
Oh, and I have no problem with the
And
incentive.
so I think that it is appropriate sometimes that you need to sweeten the pot, so to speak, for the right kind of development that is going to improve the overall environment of the city. I would hope that Councilmember Beckman, as she said, is the primary environmentalist on the group. I have the benefit of driving 10 blocks to get to my job. That improves the fact that I don't drive many miles per year with my automobile, about 6. It improves my quality of life immeasurably. I drive over to Tampa occasionally to see a client and rip my hair out. That's why I have less and less. And I can't imagine doing that commute on a daily basis. I think it should be one of our main objectives to have more employment centers within the city of Clearwater that our residents can work at, and they don't need to travel as far, and that helps everybody. So, great conversation. We're going to take a 5-minute recess before we go into our next work session.
Yeah, so I have it ordered too.
Those cookies?
Oh,
Is the order form all gone or
no. Yeah, there's no actual order form,
just tell you?
but you just tell me what you want and.
Good morning. We will call the January 31st, 2022 regular council work session to order. Item 2.1.
Declare surplus for the purpose of sale for development of affordable housing, real property located at 601, 619, 637, 655, and 637 Blanche B. Littlejohn Trail, and approve the contract between the city and Habitat for Humanity of Pinellas County.
Good morning, Mr. Lane.
Good morning. Thank you. Chuck Lane, Economic Development and Housing Department. This property is comprised of 5 platted lots, each ranging between 5,000 and 7,400 square feet. The city purchased the lots in 2018 to be temporarily used as a staging site during construction of the Clearwater gas complex. That project is complete, and these lots are no longer needed for any city purposes. The contract states it will sell the lots to Habitat for Humanity for $20,000 each for a total sale price of $100,000. Habitat will construct 5 homes, with each home meeting the city's definition of workforce or affordable housing. We'll likely close the transfer of the property with 2 separate closings. 3 of the lots are zoned low-medium residential, and 2 of them are zoned institutional. So the city is going to process a land use and zoning change on the institutional lots while we still own them, and this is going to take some time. So we'll close on the residentially zoned lots first, likely within the next couple of months, and then we'll close on the remaining 2 lots when that process is complete. So I'll take questions, please.
Well, I'm glad we're getting back to the original plan. These are perfect for that purpose. Any questions? We'll discuss it further on Thursday. 3.1. Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Approve a locally funded agreement between the State of Florida Department of Transportation and the City of Clearwater to fund design fees for the State Road 60 pedestrian overpass.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Jim Halios, Director of Parks and Recreation. I'm bringing this item back before you that was originally presented in December of 2021 for a locally funded agreement between the State of Florida DOT and the City of Clearwater. I know there was some initial questions regarding when this project was actually funded, and through research, this project came up through the CIP process and was funded by Council in fiscal year 2017-2018. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, I'm the one that really delayed this. I still would have liked to have seen what a ground level crossing would have cost. Nobody can seem to get me that information. Mr. Blanton of Ford Pinellas is a huge proponent of this. Of course, he lives right next to it and is a biker, but everybody can draw their own conclusions on that one. I find it interesting that we've never looked as closely at Court and Chestnut because they're heavily used as well, and we don't have a true crossing. All we have is the flashing yellows. But I understand that FDOT is going to go forward with this project in the enhanced, with the enhanced design that the city had asked for, whether we support it or not. It would be interesting to back out, but I think it's a shame. And I think we've made a commitment. So I'm going to support it. The $1 million that we basically necessitated for better design. I think it is going to block a lot of the views, and I think this could have been done at ground level rather than spending the enormous amount of money, but I am going to support it. Vice Mayor?
I'm supporting it as well, but what gets me is when you look at the picture in our packet and what it shows, this is a massive construction, and the ADA requires all of this, which makes it that much larger and that much more expensive. So this is what you have to do to meet it. And I know I've recommended in many places or numerous times before, US 19, the new US 19 overpass being one of them, pedestrian overpass that's getting ready to be built. Did we even look, or did FDOT even look at a tunnel underneath instead of over top? You meet the ADA requirements much easier going with a tunnel, but given this is fairly close to the water, so it's I'm not sure the physics of it. people smarter than I would be able to do it, but I don't know if it was even looked at. But given the volume of traffic that this road services, having an unimpeded pedestrian access to get across it makes sense. I just, the mass of the project is just, mind-boggling.
It's government gone wild. Councilmember Beckman.
I would say, rather than government gone wild, I think we honor our commitments. We had a verbal commitment. We asked for this. We are looking to improve safety. We've had articles recently that, Pinellas County leads the nation in fatalities. We want to keep this safe, and we do have ADA requirements. And rather than, sigh or roll our eyes about ADA requirements, they are what they are. And this is what we need in order for people who are compromised with mobility to be able to cross the road safely. And it's good for bikers, it's good for walkers, it's good for elderly, it's good for everyone. So I'm happy that it's going forward, and I don't think it's some gaudy monstrosity from Ocean's 11. I think it'll look just fine. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, first of all, I want to make clear, nobody's saying that we should shirk our ADA responsibilities. So I think you need to clarify that.
Well, it's just that they're with ADA, it has to be larger. It has to be quite large for.
No, the rise over the run for the ramp has to meet ADA, but you can also do that at grade. So nobody is suggesting that we don't make this ADA compliant. First of all, we can't. We don't even have that choice. Secondly, I understand what you're saying about previous commitments, but no previous council can commit a future council to anything. And there may come something that you disagree with a previous council on, so just be careful what you ask for.
I will.
Councilmember Bunker.
Yes, as a member of the Courtney Campbell Causeway Board, I'm happy to see us furthering our commitment to this. Our side of the Courtney Campbell Causeway seems to be in really terrific shape. What problems there are seem to exist over on the Tampa side, and they're working on that. It is a little shocking to see the design because it is large, but it has to be. And I'm sure there's more than one person living near it. But that trail is important for folks all along the causeway. So.
And just a couple points of clarification. One, this isn't the final design. We're going to have about, kind of 3 iterations that we'll be able to share once we get in that project and that far into the project. And then when we did speak with DOT, they did indicate that even if we did not fund through it, they would not fund the beautification part of it. So it would just be, if we had backed out, it would have been a standard overpass, much like you would see on 19 or 275, somewhere in that area.
Councilmember Albritton.
Yeah, I was for this from the beginning. This was something that was delayed a year or so ago and then came back with the funding for DOTs paying most of it, well, most all of it. The design change was at the behest of Clearwater. But I think we have a real problem in Pinellas County and in Clearwater of having very dangerous streets. And there's a Safe Street project that's going on right now that you're going to hear a lot more about on how we can make it our streets more safer for pedestrians. Now this is a major trail connection that goes from Courtney Campbell all through our trail system. A lot of people are going to be using this, and to herd them across at street level, I think, is not being the safest way to do this. We will have deaths if that happens. Even at a stoplight, people will get run over. So this is really a good plan. I'm glad we're going forward with it. As far as the trail that we have coming across 8 lanes in downtown Clearwater, I think something like this would be too big for the entrance to our city. However, we are looking at plans to take people down Turner Street, Orange, and then, down the little ramp through the park and then back up to True Street without really having to cross 8 lanes of traffic. If they want to take a shorter route, they can take the chance, but most people we're hoping will go through the park and up that way, in the downtown area. So I hope this goes forward.
Consent?
Yep.
4.1.
Approve an agreement between the City of Clearwater and Fuses for a video and data collaboration platform.
Good morning, Dan Slard, Chief of Police. This item is for a video and data collection collaboration platform for the Police Department's Real-Time Crime Center. This product takes the multiple data points available to and presents them to the analyst or the detective in what's referred to as a single pane of glass. So that single display map will show the users the available video cameras in the area, license plate reader locations, officer locations, and make that available to the analyst and the detective so they can simply hyperlink and go right into those systems rapidly and provide that real-time information we're looking to in the field. It will also allow us to partner with businesses so that if they choose to voluntarily either give us access to certain cameras in their particular locations, or even allow for just a registry for people to indicate that they have cameras, they're available, and then we can simply use the registry to make contact with them rapidly and try to exchange of that information. It'll provide the ability for the public to provide us video, data, photos in a collaborative way so that it can be quickly attained, much like if you are familiar with the manner in which they investigated the Boston Marathon bombing. They took millions and millions of data points and just had to analyze them, and this will allow us to have a scalable platform so that we won't crash a system trying to gather that information in an emergency. It is $95,000 a year for 3 years. We are asking for the purchasing authority also in case we need them for the additional core devices. The core devices is that device that makes those other private security cameras accessible to us individually, and provide up to 3,000 data points, and with this particular 43 core devices included, and it also has an analyst function that allows video data to be analyzed to look for particular pictures, photos of say like a red car or a child or something of that nature rapidly. I'm more than happy to try to answer any questions.
Questions for the chief? Councilmember Beckman.
So this sounded really interesting, this agenda item. I put talk about Big Brother. But okay, so if I own a business in a higher crime area and agree, so it's called Fusus, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this Fusus core device, do I pay for it? Do I put it on my camera? Or you just mentioned a registry. So if I have a business and a camera,
right,
I can register with a Clearwater Police Department says, I've got this camera. If there's ever crime in the area, please know that I have a camera. You can ask to view some of my footage.
Yes, there's multiple ways. The registry is one simple system. If you don't want us to have access to it, you can simply say, we have cameras, they're here available, here's a contact information, and then we can say we need to what's referred to as canvass a neighborhood to look for video. We can just send it out to all the contacts. They check their own. If they have something, they send it to us. That's the registry.
Okay.
The core device is a device that actually can be attached to their security platform and allow us to see their cameras, whichever cameras they choose to give us. It's all voluntary. And although some people may refer to us as Big Brother, we're like actually the middle son or the young brother. Facebook is your big brother. But so it's all voluntary,
okay,
and there's no obligation. Where I see we have some devices that we would potentially purchase, and also some where we may say, this is, if you want to do it, you can do it, and let the business pay for it. But think about a countryside mall. So if we have an active shooter, we want to have a core device there so we can access the cameras in a very seamless, quick way. Those are the variety of the partnerships we're looking to leverage. If a bank has security videos and the alarm goes off, this CAD data would pop up on this Fusus platform, and we'd immediately be able to access the video camera and see if they're being robbed right now. We're not looking to see who's going to the
No,
bar.
I'm all for it. If we're out in public and there are cameras, it's okay to, I don't have a big problem with cameras out in public and to keep people honest and safe. One of the questions I have is, if we have a business that wants to have one of our devices put on it, we pay for that device to put on their existing camera, right?
there'll be strategic decisions that we would have to make. If it's the mall, I'm probably going to do it because there's significant value to me for like the mall. If it's, you know, small mom and pop business and we don't have a lot of crime in the area and there's no kind of business purpose argument that I can make for us to do it, then of course we would, you know, and they're transportable too. If we have a crime problem, we can use one of our devices here, and once the problem abates, we can move on.
Okay, good. So we can, and then if it's a high crime area, perhaps we can could we approach a resident and say, hey, you seem to have a good vantage point here. Can we put some of our camera here? Can we do that as well?
It's possible.
Okay. And then,
But let me clarify though real quick on that. For me to be in like the residential community would be probably a little more, it'd have to be a significant issue for the privacy. See, there's a difference to me between being in the commercial space and in the residential space.
in your neighborhood? Okay. And then I have a note that this is $95,000 at a cost of $95,000 a year. So do we have any sense of how many outside entities will choose to participate? Can it be a lower cost initially because it's a 3-year contract at $95,000?
So it's kind of a subscription price, and it includes many of the core devices that we intend to need already. The subscription is for the multiple data points that I mentioned, and so when you start thinking about all those data points, we're talking about the city of Clearwater's cameras, you know, our 750 cameras, the cameras that we want to leverage on, say, Beach Walk and some of the other high dense areas. So I think the price is really what we believe we need, and the first year we'll pay for out of the forfeiture funds, and then we'll budget for it moving forward.
Okay. It just seemed like it's going to take some time to build, but we're charged $95,000 every year. I could see.
You'll see in the agreement there's kind of a 2-phased implementation, and we don't get billed until phase 1's complete and phase 2 starts. So we kind of tried to make sure that we protected ourselves from that particular space, so that we weren't paying for nothing for 6 months.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. And then, so we purchase those core devices and we're going to own them? Or do
Yeah,
we lease
they'll
them?
come with the subscription, yes.
Okay. Because I wondered, what if they're vandalized? What if, you know, what responsibility does that private business that might have them bear? You know what I mean? So if...
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily perceive that as a high-risk problem. I mean, if they're vandalized or something by some, employee of the business that, for whatever reason, has an issue with it, it'd be a criminal mischief, it'd be a crime. Okay. And we'd hold them accountable for it.
Okay.
Hopefully get them on camera.
Okay. And then, I think you answered this question, but I have the last sentence. Does future fiscal year funding mean after the 3-year agreement or in the 22-23 budget?
It means in the next budget cycle.
Okay.
We'll budget for it in the next cycle.
Thank you.
All right.
Other questions? Are there any follow-on items that you could anticipate? I mean, we did the license plate readers, now we're doing these cameras. Are there any more follow-on items that we can expect potentially with this? I'm just, kind of want to get a final cost.
Right. I don't see, I mean, I always think there's going to be growth in this space, potentially. I mean, I could see the expansion of license plate readers. I'm not in the near future, I don't, but I don't think this is going to be like one and done. I think over time, you're going to see this technology continue to evolve and become more prevalent, and it'll expand. So I guess the answer to that is I don't think this is one and done. This Fuchsia's platform actually will, I mean, there is going to be some offset cost because we have a product called Live Earth that was kind of complementary to this, and another one called BriefCam. Those two will probably fall off, and this one will be able to do all of those things and the single pane of glass function that we need. So as technology evolves, I wouldn't expect this product, the reason it's a 3-year agreement is because in 3 years you'll have to make an evaluation on whether or not there's something that's different, better, advanced, improved.
So we have subscriptions with Axon.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have one here, but we own the equipment.
For you mean like the core devices?
Right.
They won't have any value without the subscription.
I understand
Yeah,
that,
so
but what is the useful life of the equipment itself?
I'd have to get
Are we
that.
replacing these every 3 years?
No,
Or
I don't.
5 years?
I don't know if Dan Mayer has that
Mr.
answer.
Mayor?
I don't think. It would be replaced.
I mean, if they're out on the beach,
No, they're in like security rooms, right?
okay, so they're internal.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, Dan Mayer, IT Director. So the core devices are an encoder that allows us to view any camera. So the reason we steered to Fusus is it's an open platform, meaning we're not bound to use a specific type of camera or a specific manufacturer. And the core devices allow us to get over the threshold to use cameras on someone else's network, and it brings it in a fashion that can be displayed on the Fusus product. So these sit in a rack in a closet. These are not cameras, physical cameras. The cameras will need to be provided by the private businesses or us in the instance of public
So how
space.
often do these core devices
They
potentially
really
have to be
should have a
replaced?
much longer lifespan. I would think 5 years is very reasonable. They're not a wear and tear item. It's an electronic gateway.
But all electronics are hot.
Right, but
everything.
you're not really changing. Throughput should not be an issue with these.
Okay.
It's more about encryption and controlled access. So I don't anticipate these, unlike cameras. Cameras keep getting more sophisticated, higher resolution. So these devices should, and these are a nominal cost. So we buy them in bunches, right? So he'll have 40 some, and then if he exceeds that, we'll buy another lot of 40 or 50 as business demand dictates.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Consent?
Yep.
5.1.
Approve change order 2 to Gibbs and Register for the construction of Cleveland Streetscape Phase 3.
Morning, Council. Kat Corcoran, Senior Landscape Architect with Engineering Department. We're presenting a change order for the value of $1,209,110.15 to account for unforeseen conditions once we started working on construction on Cleveland Street, in addition to staff-requested changes in materials and a contingency bump so that I don't have to come do this again.
So can you go through a little bit more on some of the
Sure.
unexpected? And how much underground work were normally those unexpected situations occur? Do we have, or are we done underground?
No, we're not done underground. We're in phase 2 of 4 right now. We're approaching shifting over to phase 3 pretty quickly here in spring. I would say we are approaching 40% of the way through the entire project. This also does include a 63-day contract extension. I forgot to mention that. This section of Cleveland Street and the spoke of Gulf to Bay that we're talking about is an extremely old roadway, and so you really never know exactly what you're going to get until you get there. We are encountering a lot of abandoned lines we don't know are abandoned, numerous private utilities that didn't come up on our initial 811 locate, so we've had to coordinate with those. And then there are additional conflicts with city infrastructure that, maybe we need to upgrade this, we didn't know it was there, while we've got it open, we don't want to open it again down the line. Does that answer your question?
Pretty much. So there can still be some unanticipated.
And that's why we're asking for
surprises.
the contingent increase.
To increase.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Albrecht.
Yeah, we ran into this when we did the streetscape on Cleveland Street, downtown and downtown core. Hit so many things we didn't know were there, so almost have to know you're going to do that. Something this old.
Other questions, Councilmember Beckman?
Yeah, I just wanted clarification. You used the phrase numerous private utilities, and in the legislative text it says, and with existing private utilities. Mm-hmm. What are private utilities? Is it like the utilities on private property?
No,
Is that what that means?
no. So we are a public utility, so that's like your water, your sewer, your storm, and
Right.
reclaimed. Private utilities are things like Spectrum, WOW, Duke Energy.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Other questions? Consent?
Yep.
5.2. Thank you.
Thank you.
Approve supplemental 1 work order to Jones Edmonds and Associates, Inc. for the East Plant Water Reclaim Facility Filter Feed Pump Station Enforcement Improvements.
Good morning,
Ron?
Jeremy Brown, Engineering Manager. The Northeast Water Reclamation Facility has 8 secondary clarifiers. Each one has its own sluice gate, excuse me, that's used to distribute the flows evenly. Last year, 2 of those sluice gates failed, making 2 of the clarifiers inoperable. The work order before you today is for engineering design services associated with replacing all of the sluice gates, in addition to some other miscellaneous repairs. I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Questions for Mr. Brown? Councilmember Beckman.
I just have a couple for learning. So this started 4 years ago, so now we're paying the engineer of record an additional $155,000 to continue to study and determine what we need to improve this East Water Reclamation Facility. And this will take about a year, and it will look at it'll encompass looking at potential resiliency improvements.
I apologize.
Oh.
I was out of order. I spoke to the one I'm going to speak to after this one. Can I back up and start over?
Yeah.
I apologize. I don't know how my notes got in the wrong order here. Flip to the wrong page. So we're on the East Plant Water Reclamation Facility filter feed. I'm sorry about that. Excuse me. The East Water Reclamation Facility has a filter feed pump station that pumps Clarifier effluent to the downstream sand filters. Due to age, condition, and risk consequence of failure, the filter feed pump station and its associated 30-inch diameter force main need to be rehabilitated and or replaced. The work order before you today is to provide design, permitting, and bidding phase services associated with that work. I apologize, Mrs. Beckman. Can you repeat now?
It's all good.
Questions on 5.2?
Yeah, probably. So anyway, so we've got, so the language says, due to age, condition, and risk consequence of failure, discharge, piping valves, all this, high-tech stuff, it needs repair, and it's right on the bay, it's right on the water. So part of my thing was, 4 years, it started 4 years ago, now we're going to pay some more to continue this study to determine what we need to improve this and how it's going to be improved. It's going to take about a year for this study, right, a $155,000 study. Then we go out for a bid to do the improvements, right? And so then it seems like this can be a 6 to 7 year long process to get this thing fixed that's right on the water, that's critical, and that's got, this high risk of consequence of failure. But that's just, for my education, that's just the way, the timeline that these things happen?
No, that's not our preferred timeline, obviously. The work began in 2018, like it says there before you. We had to call a pause on the project because we didn't have the resources to continue managing it, and so there was a couple year kind of a delay. And now we're resurrecting the project right now to move forward with it. As it says on the bottom, we anticipate this will be done in about a year, and then we'll go to bid, and it may take maybe 6 months to a year to actually construct it. So I think we're probably around the 2-year time frame versus the 6 to 7.
And did we put a pause on the project because we didn't have resources to manage the project, because we're having difficulty hiring people to be in those higher positions in your department?
Yes.
Okay. So we need to attract high-quality candidates to get our work done and pay them, right?
We have open positions that are posted to the internet. Anybody who's listening, please go to myclearwater.com and take a look.
And those positions have been open for over a year?
That's really a question for Ms. Kibben or Mr. Jennings.
Okay.
Well, I can speak. One of the positions has been open for over 3 years.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember, these are all the issues that we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly equitable pay and things like that.
Consent?
Yes.
5.3.
Approve a work order to Black and Beach for the Northeast Water Reclamation Facility Clarifier Splitter Box Rehabilitation.
Again, Jeremy Brown, Engineer Manager for Utilities. I apologize for having to read this to you twice. The Northeast Water Reclamation Facility has 8 secondary clarifiers. Each has its own sluice gate used to distribute flow. Last year, 2 of those failed, making 2 clarifiers inoperable. The work order before you today is for engineering design services associated with replacing all of the sluice gates. I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Questions on 5.3?
So we're replacing all 4, not just 2?
Well, there's 8 total.
There's a,
2 of them failed. The rest aren't in any better condition. They were all installed around the
So
same
replacing
time,
all
so
8.
we're going to go ahead and replace all of them, yeah.
Is this something that we have alarms on, or do humans have to
No.
catch this? Is it mechanized? What's,
These are mechanical. There's a around, it's a,
valve?
well, they're gates. They slide up and down, right? And so depending on whether they're open or closed, they're going to allow the flows to go through there. And so the way this works is there's 2, I'll call them trains. So imagine 4 clusters of circles, and there's a channel. The common channel goes right to the center of all 4 of them. In there is where these 4 gates are, which will allow the flow to go to any of those 4, clarifiers. But they're manually operated.
So if they fail, a human has to recognize that.
Yeah, I'm sure they notice quite often. They do routine inspections as they wander around their facilities.
All right, other questions?
That was my question. Was there a monitoring system on that? So people have eyes on it all the time to let us know when it's starting to struggle and how we can maintain it. And
Yeah, and unfortunately, the way it failed, it was all contained within the splitter box. So there was no discharge of effluent at all.
Okay.
It just reduces their capacity to treat waste. That's all.
Consent?
Yes.
Yep.
5.4.
Thank you.
Thank
Approve
you.
a purchase order to T2 Systems, Inc. for the purchase of license plate recognition equipment.
Morning, City Council, Mr. Mayor. Jeremy Elshouse, the city's parking manager. I come to you today. The parking system wants your approval to purchase 4 Genetec mobile LPR units. They'll be permanently mounted in parking enforcement vehicles. This is to replace and enhance our current LPR capabilities that have been ongoing since 2019. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Beckman.
so this was another real interesting agenda item. So, so it says that these license plate readers will allow the operator to check hundreds of vehicles per minute while the enforcement vehicle is in motion, which improves efficiencies, speeds workflow, and improves safety for the operators. They don't need to walk amongst vehicles as frequently. So that sounds like, wow, hundreds per minute. Okay, so then we've got, the cost of the equipment is $147,000. Shipping is $8,000. 3-year maintenance is $12,000. I had a question about 3 years. It says 3 years of preventative maintenance for $12,000. I'm hoping that there's also a warranty with that equipment, right?
Yes.
Not just preventative, but a warranty that's not going to.
That's correct. The standard warranty is 1 year. Preventive maintenance obviously keeps up. We could purchase an extended warranty. But it's like $35,000 for the extended warranty. You can buy a lot of parts for $35,000. So anytime within the first year, though, if we feel like we want to go that way, we can do that. But at this point, for $35,000, we're going to take a wait and see on that.
I'm not usually a warranty type of person, but okay. So we only get a 1-year warranty with these things, then, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then I'm thinking, okay, how did you arrive at 4 of them? And, will this take the place of how many parking enforcement officers? And so what is the cost of 4 officers versus the cost of this program? And what is the potential revenue generated from the officers versus revenue generated from this technology? So I kind of looked at this as similar to a synergistics or whatever. Does this stuff pay for itself? So if we're going to spend this much on these readers that can read hundreds of license plates a minute, they better generate enough revenue to pay for that.
We're already using these, though.
Correct. We currently have 2 that are kind of at end of life, so we want to replace those and put 2 more. There's really no plan at this point for it to replace an employee. This is to enhance their capabilities as they currently are. We do. The enforcement is kind of an entry-level position. We got a lot of folks coming in and moving on and that kind of stuff. So we were just kind of celebrating a little bit. We finally had all of our positions filled just a couple weeks ago. We hired the one to fill the last position, and then somebody, he's moving on to be a paramedic, and so we're never fully at full strength as far as that goes. So this is to make them more efficient. Obviously, the hundreds per minute, that's real data, but that's in a perfect environment, kind of a test environment. You line them all up and you can drive down the road at 35, 40 miles an hour and it'll read them. Obviously, that's not going to be the true application when they're maneuvering through parking lots and that sort of thing.
So, but do you have a way to prove that this pays for itself, that we're getting more benefit out of it?
This is used mostly to, for the purpose of enforcement. Our enforcement last year revenue from parking tickets, which is basically what this assists them in issuing, was in excess of $1 million.
Okay. And then I guess I had one question about the distinction between permit and scofflaws. A permit, somebody who's got a permit that isn't parked in the right place?
Right, so this integrates with our permitting software as well as our mobile payment and our kiosks. So all those things are telling the system license plate ABC123 is paid for, this period of time. Or this vehicle has a permit. It's a beach employee and they're allowed to park in this lot. So that's how it's identifying all those, and as they click by them, it's reading them good. Oh, this one's not paid, doesn't have a permit. Address it.
Thank you.
Other questions? Consent?
Yes.
5.5.
Thank you.
Approve a master agreement and work order from Adkins North America, Inc. for design and bidding of Phase 1 of the Fort Harrison Avenue Corridor Improvements Project.
Again, Jeremy Brown, Engineering Manager. The potable water, wastewater collection, and stormwater systems along Fort Harrison are aging beyond their useful life and must be replaced. The work order before you today is to design the replacement of all underground utilities, including a new reclaimed water main, in addition to full-depth roadway reconstruction. Also included are traffic analyses and intersection evaluations that will look to promote safe, accessible, and healthy travel for all users. With that, I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Beckman.
You've got here it says the project scope includes utility design, and you're going through that. In addition to recommending means of incorporating green infrastructure and sustainability to align with Green Print 2.0, can you just expand on what that looks like there?
Yeah, so we asked the consultant to have a task specifically to review our Green Print 2.0 and then to submit a technical memo to us that will identify areas that we can incorporate, or maybe they recommend we incorporate, and other areas that maybe we looked at but for whatever reasons are not appropriate for this type of a project.
Thank you for doing that. Good.
So after all this design is done, have we identified the funding sources for the work, which is a breathtaking amount?
Well, yeah, there's roads, stormwater, water, sewer, reclaimed water. They're all in the...
Is it all budgeted?
They're all in this, it says here on the bottom here, they're all in the Fort Harrison Reconstruction Capital Improvement Project C2102.
It's like $70 million.
Someone else might be able to speak more than that,
Yeah,
more than that too.
Tara Kivett, Engineering Director. So yes, obviously the bulk of this funding will come later during the construction phase. Construction is always significantly more than design, and most of this project will be funded by the Enterprise Fund.
Development agreement between AP Beach Properties and the City of Clearwater for property located at 401, 405, 415, 419 Coronado Drive, and 406, 410, 420 Hampton Drive.
Thank you, Mark Perry, Planning and Development. This project, or this proposal, will add 3 parcels to a previously approved overall project that was going to have a hotel on it. There's been no changes to any aspect of the application since the council meeting of January 20th. If there are any questions on this, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you.
Any questions? We've discussed this several times already.
I guess my question is, what is this accomplishing that we didn't already do?
We had to set the date to hear
this
the
was, we
resolution.
established the date. Okay, all right.
So now we get to talk about it on Thursday for the final time, hopefully. Any other questions for Mr. Perry? All right, 7.1.
Authorize an increase to current purchase orders with Verizon Wireless for cellular and mobile data services.
Mayor, Council, Dan Mayer, IT Director. We came to you in September and approved the wireless contract for the coming year. Due to the pandemic, the state was behind on renewing their contract licensing for services, so we did not have a new contract that extended beyond January. That is now in place, and we're asking for approval for the balance of the fiscal year against that new contract.
Any questions for Mr. Mayor? Consent?
Sir, can I take a liberty, if you'll allow me?
For you, Dan, anything.
Sorry. With regard to the parking issue, I think it's imperative that you understand that we've had a massive paradigm shift. We don't walk meters anymore and collect cash. Everything is done electronic. And just in the last 3 years, all of the license plates have been added to a database. So this is a radical shift in terms of how we record it, how we monitor it, and how we conduct business. So the question on return on investment is legitimate. At the same time, it's the only way we can do business because that's how the systems work.
We bought into that equipment.
Correct.
Makes me mad because I can't back in anymore. But
so, but it is a big change.
You can, you'll just get a
they've
ticket.
done an excellent job of keeping up with the technology. So we're vastly more efficient today than we were just 3 years ago.
I know I got a ticket on Friday.
Sorry.
one of the highlights of the technology, though,
Yeah,
was
2 of them.
the first day that our new city manager was here, he got a warning because he was backed in.
Yes.
Found it.
I didn't get a warning.
It's brutally unforgiving.
You were backed in somewhere?
No, I was parked at the EV and I wasn't charging because somebody else was charging. And I forgot to register the car that we purchased in November, so anyway.
If it's any consolation, I got one last week in the parking garage
Well,
because I sold my car to my son and I bought a different one and I didn't register the new plates.
I know. How about a little grace period or something?
Consent on 7.1?
Yeah.
Yes. 8.1.
Authorize a purchase order Barney's Pumps, Inc. of Lakeland, Florida for the purchase of Aurora and Homa pump parts, maintenance, and repair services.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Mike Flanagan, Public Utilities Assistant Director. The item before you today is a award of a sole source contract for the purchase of custom pumps, parts, maintenance, repair services. The pumps are used to replace existing equipment in kind. Replacement of pumps with other manufacturers' equipment would require re-engineering modification of the existing piping system. We're recommending award to Barney's Pump in the amount of $150,000. This is a 1-year contract through February 2023 with the option of 2 1-year renewals. I'm asking for your approval to award, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions on 8.1? Consent?
Yeah.
9.1.
Amend City Council Rule 6, Order of Business.
Sorry. Still struggling here, but this is, we're bringing this forward to streamline the process of our meetings, and certainly happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So for the public's benefit, can you just talk about maybe, actually, Mr. Margolis, talk about what this means as far as we go through agendas, what our previous process looked like versus what the future is going to look like?
Sure. This is really just a matter of administrative efficiency more than anything else. I mean, what Mr. Jennings and I discussed was that this rule will create a specific time space or time slot for Mr. Jennings to have the opportunity to weigh in and discuss things. It's not always clear as we go through agenda items when he should speak or when he shouldn't speak, and so this just creates a time for him to be able to speak and to be able to call on anyone he likes for the item. So it should just keep things on track and will help him, I think, be able to weigh in when he wants to weigh in and designate when he wants to designate. That's all.
Anything else you want to add, Mr. Jennings? All right. Well, we'll discuss that further on. Thursday, 9.2.
Schedule a special council meeting for September 29, 2022 at 6 p.m. to adopt the millage rate for fiscal year 2022-2023.
Consent?
Yeah.
9.3.
Appoint 3 individuals to the Marine Advisory Board to fill the remainder of unexpired terms, and 2 for through May 31st, 2023, and 1 through July 31st, 2023. Council members, hold on 1 second. In your agenda pack, we had our member Christina Joseph. We had, due to her excessive absences and unable to attend or to have contact with her, I recommended to the city manager that she be pulled from the board. Michael Mack had resigned, and Mr. O'Brien had also resigned. So in your agenda packs, we have an application for Julie Battaglia, Dina Stanley, and Stephen Boris for your consideration.
I mean, they all look fine to me, except, you know, it wasn't necessarily their first choice. So
We need to fill 3 positions. We've got 3 names. I don't see any reason not to just go with it.
Other comments?
I think I have scheduled, I think it's going to be scheduled on the next work session to have a discussion that I like to lead on our advisory boards and our process of soliciting candidates and reviewing candidates and all that business. So, you know, I think there are some improvements, but now isn't the time. So I'm fine with moving forward with our standard operating procedure here with these 3.
Consent then on 9.3?
Council members, if you can tell me how you would like to separate the appointments in terms of their terms.
Yeah.
I'll need 2 for May 31st and 1 through July.
We do that on Thursday.
We can. That's fine. We'll continue until Thursday. 9.4.
Appoint 1 member to the Public Art and Design Board with term to expire February 28, 2026. Council members, in your agenda pack, Mr. Neil Strelo was a citizen, and he was serving his 2nd complete term, so per council rules, or rather per code, a new appointment is needed. So you have applications for Teresa Bozen and Meg Taylor, who is currently serving her 1st term on the Nuisance Abatement Board.
Questions or comments? They both seem qualified and enthusiastic. Councilmember Beckman?
I agree, they both seem qualified and enthusiastic. Ms. Taylor's already serving on a board. Ms. Bozen has attended a number of these art advisory board meetings. She's spoken. She's an artist who is currently working in our library system during COVID, and she's proactive and really wanting to get engaged. She does show up to these advisory board meetings and speaks, so I think she'd be a good candidate on this board. I think she'd do a nice job.
I have no problem with that.
I'm fine with her.
Yep.
Consent on Ms. Bozen?
Yes.
All right, 9.5.
Appoint 3 members to the Community Development Board with terms to expire February 28, 2026. Council members, Mr. Barker was not interested in reappointments, and that was just because of personal and work commitments. Jordan Behar also had resigned, or rather is not interested in reappointment, and he just wants another member of the community have the opportunity to serve on the board. And then Mr. Boutsikis, he has just served his 2nd term, so per code he's not allowed to resubmit since it's a quasi-judicial. So in your application, in your agenda packs, you had applications from Andrew Caudell, Brenda Dallas Griffith, David J., William Johnson, Travis Norton, Nicholas West, and Andrew Winkler, and Bruce Rector, who is serving his 1st term on the Parks and Recreation Board for your consideration.
Okay. I'd just as soon hold off on this one until Thursday. I think it's going to be a longer discussion, and I don't think we're going to get consent, is my sneaking suspicion. So we'll just talk about that further on Thursday.
Can I ask just one question?
Yes.
Okay. So Mohammed Abdur Rahim is an alternate on this board?
Yes.
Is there a reason why he didn't automatically move in?
He was not interested in serving in the alternate.
Okay, just
We did
wondering.
approach Mr. Rahim.
Okay. Any questions on second reading? 10.1. City manager verbal reports. Anything, Mr. Jennings?
I just want to thank everyone, mayor, members of the council, and the community. During my recent experience with COVID, I had been so incredibly careful, fully vaxxed, boosted, but unfortunately Omicron has been something that's impacted a lot of people. And so I'm kind of getting back into the swing of things, and I just want to thank all of you for the support in the community as well.
Mr. Margolis, anything?
Just wanted to say welcome back to Mr. Jennings. It's good to have you back.
It certainly is. Any new business from council? Councilmember Beckman.
Yeah, so I went to the EAB meeting last week, and it was a great meeting. There were a lot of topics covered, and one of the things was our, I forget her title, but our lead architect, design, and project manager for Imagine Clearwater CAT took us up onto the rooftop of the library, and we looked down at Imagine Clearwater and the construction down there. And one of the questions brought up by one of our EAB members, Mr. John Thomas, was a concern about the seagrass and protection of the seagrass out near Imagine Clearwater if boats would be mooring east of the channel. And so I would like to schedule a presentation sometime, and it doesn't have to be like right now, but a presentation from an expert on seagrass and the protections of manatees in our environment related to the possibility of boats anchoring near Imagine Clearwater once it's completed. And so part of the statement is there is a need for mooring restrictions to protect seagrass beds north of the marina and lie northwest of the existing harbor master building. The primary navigation channel is located about 400 feet west of the seawall. It is anticipated that boaters will moor in the area east of the channel and drop anchor to enjoy the concerts. Over time, numerous boaters pulling anchor, will inevitably remove seagrass. So I think, a presentation from someone who specializes in that would be good. I serve on the Tampa Bay Estuary Program Board, and perhaps I can ask if they can recommend an expert to let us know what some concerns might be and how we might want to plan for that.
Okay. Anything else? All right, we are adjourned till Thursday.